Okay.
Hi everyone and welcome. It is that time of week, time for another hashtag BC Poly Hot Stove. I'm Jordan Bateman. I'm the VP Communications for the Independent Contractors and Businesses Association, the mighty ICPA, ICBA, joined as always by...
I'm Maclean K. I am the editor-in-chief of the Orca, and welcome to the bronze medal, the third best podcast on the Orca.
Ooh, we're that high up. This is great. First in your
well,
hearts.
We're not counting audio podcasts, which is the only reason we're tenuously hanging on to our third place finish.
You know, we're the most self-effacing podcast, I would say.
That's true.
You know,
That's true.
No problems at all there. Maclean, how are things overseas in Victoria?
Well, they're quiet compared to the last few weeks. It's hard not to walk around the ledge and feel like we're missing something. But after the craziest and news-makiest session in recent memory, it's kind of pleasant for things to be a little back to normal here.
Yeah, so it's like, is Alan Mullen still, I was going to say skulking about, but, you know, working. I'll use that word loosely.
I mean, I haven't seen him myself, but he is here, to the best of my knowledge. He lives here full time now, but yeah, the business of the legislature continues even when the House is not sitting, and that includes the investigations.
But who's the sergeant at arms right now? Like, who's in charge of the mace?
You know, I actually don't know the answer to that question because we were already on the deputy, and then the deputy and the deputy's deputy are all gone. So I have no idea.
You better check this out.
I can probably guess.
You better make sure, because it might fall into like you or Rob Shaw or someone. You guys don't even know. You're like the last guy in the building.
Fair.
Last guy in the building's the sergeant at arms. Maybe that's what happens. Anyways, I'll leave that with you. That's important investigative work that we need for, I don't know why, but it'd be entertaining to know. All right, so Maclean, big national news coming up. We are 1 week away from actually less than a week, 6 days away from the June 18th federal Liberal government cabinet meeting in Ottawa, where they are fully expected to give the final yay or nay to the TransMountain Pipeline. Spoiler alert, it's going to be a yay. Since they own it, they can't exactly, blow their brains out over $4.5 billion and not approve this thing. But here we are, June 18th is coming up quickly. This is a big day for Canada. This is not going to be a great day, I think, for John Horgan and for Andrew Weaver and for the professional pipeline protesters. What do you expect from a BC perspective on Tuesday?
Well, I mean, I don't think it's going to be a bad day for professional pipeline protesters. I mean, that's they're gonna be kept employed.
They're re-upping. They're re-upping.
I mean, there's no question that John Horgan, Andrew Weaver, George Heyman, they will be probably very upset. But I mean, I can't imagine this is going to come as a surprise. I mean, we're not talking about stupid people. They were able to read the tea leaves in the most recent Court of Appeal decision as well as anyone. And also, as you mentioned, the fact that the federal government now actually owns the pipeline. And I think the thing that's even more telling is we're starting to see a lot of stories come out about not just First Nations groups that want to invest or even outright own the expanded pipeline, but competing groups. So it's not like they just sort of cobbled together a single First Nation. It's like there's actually real interest. And so, I mean, I think if they're paying attention, and I believe they are, they know what's coming.
Yeah, I think we're up to 3 different groups now of First Nations.
Yeah.
With multiple First Nations represented within those groups. Very interesting. I thought Tom Flanagan had an interesting report looking at how it's kind of the wealthier urban First Nations who are the only ones left fighting this thing. Looking at you, Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh, where of course they have other economic development options, namely property development. You don't get that in a lot of these far-flung First Nations unceded territories. So this is all coming down the pike. It seems like everything is kind of convening onto the 18th. We should note that the TransMountain Pipeline is 18-1 in court cases. The one being the one that kind of forced the Trudeau government to go back and reconsult with First Nations, have more than just a tape recorder, but actually look like you're actually assimilating some information and making some changes to it. So, yeah, it sounds, from every indication we're hearing, it sounds like they've got their ducks in a row and they feel confident that they can approve this thing and get it going.
Well, and I mean, if they must be extra confident because, of course, as everyone knows, it's an election year. And I mean, one of the things that the pipeline protesters have done successfully is they've managed to get this out there. I mean, even nationally, that BC is against this pipeline. You hear it over and over and over and over again, and I mean, it's not true.
It's demonstrably false.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a it's not a cripplingly huge majority, but a majority of British Columbians have consistently said they're in favor of this project. And so, I mean, that's one thing I think in the aftermath it'll be sort of interesting to look back at the tactics on both sides. And you'll have to say on the protest side that was a bit of a win on their part, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, across the province as a whole, I think we're closing in on 2/3 support for the pipeline.
That's right. Yeah.
Even in the Lower Mainland, there hasn't been a poll in years that shows less than 50% support for the pipeline, which means more in favor than opposed, obviously. So it's one of those myths. Every First Nation is another myth is opposed to this. That also demonstrably false. But look, eventually, advocacy organizations who lie a lot and make up things to fit their narrative get caught out on it. And the fact that you now have 3 different Indigenous groups who want to buy in, the fact that even Vancouver and Burnaby, I think, are pretty split on on whether or not this pipeline should go forward. Certainly not as dramatically opposed as Candy Stewart or George Heyman or the Dogwood Initiative would want you to believe. This thing has come a long way, and groups like ICBA, who's been supportive of this from the beginning, we're pretty proud of the work we've done there over the years. The group I'm interested in hearing from Maclean, from a BC perspective, is the building trades unions. You may recall them from the Sweetheart Union monopoly deals given to them by John Horgan. In return, John Horgan got an award from them. I'm sure, coincidentally, the NDP got $2.5 million in donations, but whatever. Those groups actually have 2 of the 7 spreads of construction of the pipeline. So it's kind of broken up into 7 parts. 2 of them go to the building trades union companies and those workers. That is why you have not heard a lot or anything from Tom Sigurdsson smacking. It's actually kind of suspicious. Like, where is Tom Sigurdsson, head of the building trades union? Why isn't he pushing John Horgan, the NDP government, to drop their stupid opposition to this? I mean, he's literally trying to cost his own guys jobs by not standing up for it. So I'll be interested to see how he continues the dance when this thing is finally announced. My bet is he'll just quietly disappear and hope to God that no one actually phones him on it. And that way he can still have the best of both worlds, which is 2 of the 7 spreads going to his guys and not pissing off the premier.
Well, I think you're right. I think that Tom Sigurdsson will have a very quiet and private, happy day next week. Yeah. And I mean, he should be. I mean, you'll know far more about this than I will. But those 2 projects for them, that's enough to keep them busy for quite some time. And these are major contracts.
Yeah, they're big deals. And look, I think it was a calculated move at some point by the TransMountain people to try to bring the BC NDP into the fold by giving them this work. It didn't work. NDP clearly still outside the camp, so bear that in mind, future construction companies across this province. You're not going to buy in. You can't buy the favor of that group. Actually, that's a lesson that Christy Clark should have learned. Maclean, remember when she used to stand there with the iron workers proudly and, we've buried the hatchet. And then guess what happened at election time, Maclean? The scorpion was still a scorpion and it stung her. So...
Well, I do recall that with some clarity.
As well. It may have come up once or twice at ICBA over the years.
Couple times.
Just once or twice, that's all. Now, interestingly, today on Twitter, Andrew Scheer, leader of the Conservative Party of Canada and current betting favorite to be the next Prime Minister of Canada, he came out and said, okay, TransMountain comes out on the 18th. On the 19th, Wednesday, you can look forward to our Conservative Party of Canada Climate Action Plan. You can bet the words carbon tax will not be in that plan. They will get rid of that Trudeau law. But this is interesting because obviously on the 18th, there's going to be a lot of attention on TransMountain. On the 19th, Scheer will come forward with what his plans are for climate, which, okay, I got to say, I think it was Aaron Woodrick from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation tweeted this out. In the last Angus Reid poll, they ask which leader is best equipped to handle the following issues. And I think Scheer led on 5 of the 6, like economy and all this different stuff. climate change was one of them, and he was not on.
Yeah.
He wasn't first in that. He was second. Elizabeth May first, Andrew Scheer second, Justin Trudeau third, and it wasn't that close. And you're going, this is what they're building their entire campaign on, is this, climate emergency, like climate change needing for action. And he's only the third most trusted leader on it. That's not smart or good. That's not a good sign for the Fed libs.
Well, I mean, you're right. And to give our site a bit of a plug, if you saw Ada Slavinsky's piece on the main site.
Yeah.
I guess that was yesterday. That's what she talks about too, is the fact that the Liberals' environmental and climate policies are starting to be seen with more and more skepticism. Hope you're okay.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just choking up over the whole thing.
He's really upset. He's really upset. He if he would give anything for that to be a plastic cup. But that's the problem. Is, I mean, this isn't even a Justin Trudeau problem. I mean, this goes back to Jean Chrétien and Paul Martin and Stéphane Dion. I mean, they signed things like the Kyoto Accords knowing full well that they were never ever going to reach targets, and in fact, emissions continued to go up, and so. Eventually, a lot of the people for whom climate will be the number one issue in the election campaign, there are a few. It's not unreasonable for them to look at the federal Liberals and say, you talk a lot, but what do you actually do? Besides symbolic things like a plastic ban, which when you look at it, isn't actually a plastic ban.
Yeah. No, it's not a plastic ban. And we're banning plastic in a country that actually does a pretty good job of managing its plastic waste as it is. Something like 90% of the plastic in the world comes from Africa and Asia. If we really wanted to do something, we do something around fishing, the global fishing industry, trying to make sure that you're not just leaving nets floating in the ocean, like making sure people are taking care of their stuff and bring it back in. But instead, we're banning straws. My daughter, God bless her, 16-year-old, goes to a school where they get lots of these progressive little suggestions given to them. And, she's like, Dad, we've got to do something about the plastic in the oceans. I'm like, Indy, we've been to Crescent Beach 1,000 times. Have you ever seen a straw on the beach? Well, no. Yeah, exactly. Like, is this not a thing in Canada? Like, we actually manage this pretty well. But instead, you've got this kind of symbolic sort of thing. Now, we'll all be drinking water out of our favorite boxes, apparently. But as the plastic man had a rough day there, Justin Trudeau.
It's a unique problem we seem to have in Canada, where we don't seem to appreciate our small space on the world stage. You hear this a lot. You saw it in Alberta. I mean, well, if this is the wrong time to get rid of the carbon tax during wildfire season, and I'm not opposed to carbon pricing either, but believing that a nominal, and it is described as nominal, carbon price in a place like Alberta is going to stop wildfires is just pretending. And every penny that was spent on this plastics ban announcement would have been better spent on straight up foreign aid, as you mentioned, to even building a single recycling facility in a place like Bangladesh or some of the countries in Africa where this is a serious problem would do a lot more good. The problem is, Canadians don't see it. That's not to suggest you can't do things like, yes, if you want to use fewer plastic bags in grocery shopping, and if you want to move to metal straws, these are good things. And I commend people that do them. But it's no different than buying an electric car while looking the other way while China adds, 4 more coal plants. Yeah. It's, you have to do both. You have to act globally and locally.
Yeah, and while children are mining the materials needed to make it happen, it's easy for us to outsource a lot of this. Look, this plastic ban it sounds great, but you start thinking of the implications. This is going to end up costing consumers a fortune. And I don't know about you, Maclean, but I'm a consumer. So, I buy stuff, and, I buy groceries. There's 5 of us living in the house. And, I think of our trips to Costco, and, is Costco ridiculous on some of its packaging? Yeah. Should we find ways to encourage them to reduce it? Absolutely. Will it cost more if they change that? Yeah. I mean, the reason they're packaged the way they are is to save money. So, I think of Amazon and the shipping that I get here, the plastic bubble wrap that they put stuff in. All of these different things, how do you, where's the line? There's going to be a huge cost to this, and these guys never look at the cost on the producers or the consumers. They always just kind of look at this, moral signal they want to send.
Well, I mean, that's it exactly. And it's either that they think that the cost will just get absorbed somewhere down the supply chain and, who cares? Or that people are fine with, kind of a symbolic sort of almost moral penalty they're giving themselves. Look at me, I'm a good person. I've foregone plastic straws.
Yeah, I don't get it. I thought the funny thing to me was how little press Trudeau got out of this. Clearly, this was a big announcement to their team. They felt this was a cornerstone going into that election. But his bumbling on that water bottle question, I don't know about you, but I saw that a lot more on Twitter and Facebook than I saw anything actually, substantive coming out of the announcement. Part of the reason why is they have nothing substantive in the announcement because they can't put the regulations in place because they know it's crazy. Like they know how expensive and difficult this is going to be. So they're at the very first steps of this process. And then second of all, he just blundered that water bottle question so badly.
He did. Well, I mean, people are attacking his, tripping over his own words, and that's fine. I mean, that's going to happen to anyone. But I think the actual bigger problem is not that he tripped over his own words. It's that should have been the easiest part of that avail. That is the question that you hope for. It's a softball that you knock out of the park. What are you doing at your home? Oh, well, I mean, 5 minutes of preparation will get you an absolute crusher of an answer about some of the things that you and your family are doing. You're using reusable cloth bags for bulk at the grocery store. You're using reusable water. You know what I mean? Like, I think most people, when pressed, could come up with a list of 5 things that they have done in their home. Yeah, that's a great example. And I mean, so yes, there are some of the people defending the prime minister are saying it's a bit unfair to mock him stumbling over his own words. That's fine. I will concede that point. But the issue is that he was completely unable to point to something plausible that he was doing in his own household, and that's what I think a lot of people want is to see, some actual moral leadership, and there is a lot of eye rolling at the Al Gores of the world telling us to reduce our carbon footprint when, I know that his is an order of magnitude larger than my whole family's.
Yeah, exactly. My favorite line on Twitter was the one that Trudeau should have mentioned, that he uses his silver spoons, not a plastic one. So, you're right. Like, little warning to all future and current politicians. If you're going to talk about issues, make sure you know your basic, like what you're doing to if you're going to virtue signal, you got to make sure you know what signals you're actually virtuing, or virtues you're signaling. For example, if you're going to talk about grocery prices, and I know this is becoming a little bit of a hot button issue among more average folks. Like, there's a steady creep up in grocery prices, and this is a big concern. Mm-hmm. And some of it's government regulation, some of it's just the expense of producing goods, some of it's going to be things like the plastic ban. But if Andrew Wilkinson or John Horgan wants to make a big deal about grocery prices, they better know what a jug of milk costs, right? Like, you better have, you better have a little bit of an understanding. By the way, it's about $4.39 at Save On, although if you cash in 1,500 of your Save On More points, you can sometimes get it for free. But you better know these little things, and you better have, you just better be able to, to talk about, ICBC is a perfect example. It's going to be rate hikes across the board this fall. A bunch of people are going to get dinged a lot. I have no doubt, if the Liberals will have a steady stream of question period questions, with certain drivers, like general people driving. But these guys better know, Andrew Wilkinson, all these guys better know exactly what their rates have gone up as well, so that they can answer that question. Like, this is affecting me too, and I'm like you, and it's costing me XYZ dollars more. So.
Well, and groceries might be the one, and I mean only, universal issue in Canada. I mean, literally everyone has to buy groceries. I mean, even things like taxes. There are a substantial portion of Canadians that don't pay taxes. But groceries is completely unavoidable. And so I think you're 100% right. Whichever party manages to latch onto that is making that their own issue is going to be ahead of the game. Yeah,
you got to be careful, right? Like, the NDP are doing a consultation right now on cell phone prices. And look, we all hate cell phone prices in Canada. It's a racket. Like, it's ridiculous what we pay compared to the rest of the civilized universe. And yet, they say they have no power over any of it. And they claim that they want to address it, so they're having like a public consultation, which will just be, frankly, a bitch fest by consumers saying we're paying too much. It has no, they know they can't deliver anything on it. They've trumped up this little consultation, but by gum, the problem for them is I think they've raised expectations that they can do something, and 2 years from now there'll be a provincial election, and Andrew Wilkinson can say affordability. You talked about cell phone prices. All you did was launch a website. You've done nothing to bring down cell phone prices. The price of gas has gone up. Groceries have gone up. All these different regulations have happened. Like, I do think that eventually you get hoisted upon your own petard, as the bard once said.
He did, in fact, say that, and I think you've just sort of previewed a moment in the leaders' debate 2 years from now, because it'll be hard for them to point to anything substantive coming from it at all. I mean, even at the announcement, they said the end goal was to share the findings with Ottawa.
Yeah.
Nothing great.
Nothing I love more than hearing three 1%ers tell me how unaffordable life is. That'll be great. Really looking forward to that. Three guys with giant pensions who don't have to worry about retirement. No problems there. That'll be fantastic. No, that's the best part of the political process. All right. Maclean, would you pardon me while I ranted for a moment again about the agricultural land reserve?
You always have license to rant on this show. You know that.
Maclean, the Agricultural Land Commission is out of control and idiotic and anti-farm and anti-modern farming, and they're being aided and abetted by a foolish minister in Lanapopum and an NDP government who cares more about the specter and the ideology of farmland than actually helping farmers make a go of it. I cannot believe that Milner Gardens in my town of Langley has to lose a major money-making event for them at Christmas when, by the way, not a hell of a lot grows in BC in December. They have to move a Christmas light event to the Tradex in Abbotsford. This is a major loss of tourism revenue to Langley. It's a major loss of revenue to that farm. It's ridiculous. That's part one. Part two, now I find out that the Hops Festival in Abbotsford has been canceled for this fall. Why? Because the Agricultural Land Reserve won't give them permission to have it on a farm because not enough hops are grown on this farm. Mind you, the regulations around farmland in BC have caused more than a third of hops farms to go out of business in the past year. There used to be 30, now there's 20. What is wrong with these fools at the Agricultural Land Commission that they can't partner with farmers to give them revenue streams they need in order to make farming financially viable? Like, what do they think is going to happen to this farmland if farmers are all out of business? Like, it just, it drives me crazy.
Well, I mean, two things I want to take from that. First is a chance to plug Milner, which is where my grandmother was born. True story. And isn't even a town anymore. But the other thing is I wrote on this, actually, I think this was pre-Orca, and this might have been in the Times Colonist. I wrote about the unique mistakes that each parties tend to make in government. And one of the, and lest you think I'm picking on the NDP, I mentioned, I'm entitled to my entitlements could only have come from a federal Liberal. And a lake of fire could only come from a provincial Conservative. But the NDP seem completely unable to avoid this kind of over-regulation, where they get themselves into trouble with prescriptions, and there's no wiggle room for real life. I mean, in the 90s, they were plagued with stories of bars having inspectors come in to measure the size of the TV on the wall, which, I mean, really? Mm-hmm. Why? And the events you describe, I mean, canceling a hops festival because it's just, no one is in favor of this. If they had said, we're canceling it because there's a fire code violation or something like that, sure, of course, please keep me safe. But, I mean, to lose what sounded like a great event, the kind of thing that I definitely would have gone to simply because of some obscure regulation, is the kind of thing that NDP governments just don't seem to be able to avoid doing.
Yeah, and if you think of all the different festivals and events that happen across the across BC on farmland, like, let's take the Tulip Festival. Okay, so Abbotsford has a giant tulip festival. It's hugely attended every spring. But you know what? None of us eat tulips. Like, when is that going to come into play? I'm upset with the Agricultural Land Reserve as it is right now, Commission right now, because they've allowed major factory farming of cannabis to come in without providing any of the smell regulations that other industries have to face. If cannabis was being grown in an industrial park, they'd have to meet these very stringent odor regulations. But because they're on agricultural land and allowed there by the LC, they get away with it, and it is obnoxious, the smell from these massive operations, like not small, like huge, well-funded, well-politically connected companies have come in and set up shop in South Abbotsford and Aldergrove. And some days you can't even drive through there because it's just such, the odor is so intense. And you're like, there are people who live in these communities, right? Like there are people who are there who are farming their own land and trying to be good neighbors, and then they have this, giant, Costco-sized warehouse grow operation suddenly appear next to them one day, and none of the regulations are being met. So I just think, like, you add that to the whole idea that farm owners aren't considered people anymore under the law. You have to have government apply for changes to things. I just wonder, like, what are we doing on this? Like, why are we built? Like, the ALC, if you're going to have it, at least let them be flexible enough to help farmers make a go of it. I'll give you an example. Cell phone towers. For a lot of farms, the number one cash crop on their farm is the cell phone tower. Like,
That's
it
true.
sort of helps them, gives them a steady stream of income in good years and in bad years that helps them sort of survive the ups and downs of farming, because farming is not a steady business. There are good years and there are bad years. Okay, so at some point the ALC said, you know what, cell phone towers are a permissible use. Good on them back in the day, 20, 25 years ago, whenever it was, to allow those. But you've got to continue to, evolve with farmers throughout the years, making sure that they can farm their land appropriately, or they all become, really fancy horse estates, like in Langley, which is horse capital of BC, and lots of people have, horses and make a few chickens in order to sell a few eggs in order to make the bare minimum they need to make the farm tax break. So it just drives me crazy. I don't know. The ALC is something I don't think that can ever be fixed under the NDP government. They're just too ideologically blind to it.
It's their baby.
It's their baby. The problem is, when the BC Liberals or Socreds get into power, all they hear about is how they're anti-farm when they want to change regulations and that. But look, this is something that needs addressing, and we need to make sure that farmers have the ability to have sustainable events along with other sustainable revenue streams in order to make a go of it. So that is my rant.
Well, that's true.
Well,
I mean, it's a fair rant, because you've outlined a list of reasonable complaints, and then the government says, good news, we've saved you from the hops festival.
Yes, thank goodness. Thank goodness, the craft beer industry. Maybe if it was more unionized, they'd have a little bit more support in Victoria. Okay, now Maclean, shifting gears here. It is CFL kickoff weekend.
Woohoo!
You and I are Canadian Football League fans, even though
yes, we are.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I'm an all kind of football fan, like NFL, like CFL. I see them as very different products. None of this precious one is better than the other nonsense. But
no,
I thought you and I should do a West Division preview and make our predictions here, how the West Division is going to go, and what our our Grey Cup prediction will be.
Faux pas.
Yeah, so exactly. Do you want to? Should we take them team by team? We kind of discuss where we think they slide in, or?
Sure. Well, let's go west to east. Let's start near you in BC Place.
2 words, sir. Mike Riley. Oh my God, he's come back to BC. With all due respect to Bo Levi, the top quarterback in the CFL. I mean, it's 1A and 1B. Pick your guy.
Yeah,
but listen, after surviving 2 years of Jonathan Jennings throwing duck after interception after duck, underthrowing on screen passes, for God's sake. Mike Riley is here. He and the beard are going to save us all, and we are very, very excited. Also, they have an improved defense. Aaron Grimes has come over to play corner, and Lord knows, is there a lonelier position in any kind of football than cornerback in the CFL?
No.
You are on an island, and you'll get burned a couple times a year, I'm sure. But he's probably one of the better performers out there. So we're very excited here in BC land.
You should be, because it looks like a very good team. You got you stole our defensive coordinator, Devon Claybrook, to be your head coach, and he's going to be fantastic. I'm a big fan of that hire. And yeah, I agree with you on Mike Riley. I'd even go as far as to say a little something extra, and that is he is the best dressed player in the CFL.
Ooh, well, there you go. I also got a hand to the Lions. Like you and I are marketing kind of guys, so we keep an eye out for this. I think their marketing has been excellent this offseason.
I agree.
They're really capitalizing on it. I kind of get a kick out of that Nothing Rhymes with Orange campaign that they're doing. And even today, I was downtown Vancouver on Broadway, walking down towards Granville Street to get a coffee. And, there was like posters, like Nothing Rhymes with Orange posters, and Mike Riley's beard, kind of attached to the post like it was a big show coming to town. So they are obviously trying to reach out to millennials and younger. And I'm not a millennial, but I have a 9-year-old son, and you can bet that we're actually wanting to go to 3 or 4 games this year. We're so excited about Mike Riley.
That's awesome. I see them definitely making the playoffs, either second or third in the division.
Well, I'm going to pick them to win the divisions. That's crass homerism by me, no doubt.
Fair enough. Speaking of crass homerism,
here we go.
The reigning and defending, I'm making the belt sign, Grey Cup champion, my Calgary Stampeders. We lost some talent, but they have been a next man up team for a long time. I say first in the West. I do.
You lost 50% of your defense and your defensive coordinator.
It's the biggest hurt is going to be on the defensive line. We lost 2 starters there. The rest, there are good people there to replace them. And the Stampeders have been losing people for years, and they always manage to replace them.
Yeah, Dave Dickinson and John Huffnagel. I mean, it's like Huffnagel, which is very close to reaching Belichickian standards here. I don't know how he does it. You go through 77 wide receivers a season, and they all can seem to catch for 1,000 yards. It's something.
I will talk to you at length offline about this, but I interviewed guys like Dickinson the year Huffnagel came back to Calgary on exactly this. I mean, okay, you hear about people changing the culture in a football team, but what does that actually mean? Don't you all still just have to block and tackle? And the answer was longer than I can get into here, but it was like, no, it makes all the difference in the world.
Yes.
A guy like John Huffnagel being in charge. And I mean, the proof is in the pudding.
Yes, Maclean and I interact with people on Twitter all the time, but nothing makes Maclean more excited than when a Calgary Stampeder answers one of his tweets.
You can actually hear me squeal probably all the way in Langley.
It is true. Now, I'm picking them to finish second. I mean, if I was going, that's a bit of a heart pick. I mean, if I was going a head pick, I think I'd probably flip 1 and 2. But I assume you see them winning the division and moving on.
I mean, until someone beats us.
Okay, so what about all this hype around Winnipeg? I have them pegged 3. Man, there's a lot of hype.
I was going to say second or third. They are a team on the rise. They're a solid, balanced team. They still have, I think, the best running game in the league. Matt Nichols has evolved into not a top-tier starter, but sort of like, just the next tier down, which is enough to win the Grey Cup with. And I think they have arguably the best and most dynamic defense in the league. So, yeah, there's a lot to be excited about there.
Yeah, I'm not a Nichols fan. Never have been, so I don't put as much stock in that. I do think Andrew Harris eventually has to break down a little bit, right?
Of course.
he's been dominating for 5 or 6 seasons now. Eventually, he's gonna break down. Maybe this will be the year. But I really always liked Tyler Loeffler. I know he left that defense, so I'm not sure. He seemed like the kind of guy who flew around and made plays, and those are hard to find in the CFL. So you can replace them, but it could be a 10% downgrade. Maybe that's enough to slow up the Bombers.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Winnipeg has by far the longest Grey Cup drought of any team in the CFL, including Ottawa.
That's right. Well, they always manage to seize defeat from the jaws of victory. So let us. I'm going to trust Winnipeg to do that again. Yeah. My crossover team.
Their Grey Cup drought, just incidentally, is longer than Baltimore's.
That's cruel. You're terrible.
It's
an 18. It was an 8-team league for how long? And it's a long. Oh my God. That's terrible. All right, my 4th place team, and I see them crossing over into the East because I think the East is terrible. I've got Saskatchewan there, and just because I think more of Zach Collaros than I do of Trevor Harris in Edmonton, and I don't know. I think Saskatchewan's defense is going to be strong, and I think Solomon Elimimian has one more great year left in him. I think he's going to have something to prove, and I think he's going to make life miserable for quarterbacks in the Western Conference.
I think one of Saskatchewan or Edmonton is going to have to finish last, and by definition, you can't finish last and still make the playoffs, and that's going to be a bit cruel, because they'll probably be better than whoever finishes second in the East. I think Edmonton will finish ahead of Saskatchewan, but I mean it's a bit of a coin toss. I wouldn't argue too much on it.
Yeah, Edmonton has lost. Edmonton has Trevor Harris, but they also lost J.C. Sherritt, who's another guy like Loeffler who can fly around the defense and do stuff. I mean that's a lot.
Well, and Trevor Harris is a good quarterback, but they lost Mike Riley. And that is, I'm sorry to Trevor, but that's a downgrade.
No, absolutely. In the East, I don't want to go through it all. They all suck, except probably for Hamilton. And Jeremiah Mazzoli managing to hold off the Johnny Football last year. And I think he's... it wouldn't surprise me if he won...
They're a pretty good team.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if he won MOP simply because he gets to feast on the East. That is not a great division. And you look at Bo Levi, he's got to play the BC defense, the Winnipeg defense, the Saskatchewan defense, and Edmonton's all 5 Western defenses, maybe 1 through 5 in the rankings. And Hamilton gets just to feast on they get to pad the stats against Toronto. Montreal fired their coach.
Hamilton's better than that. I think they're better than Edmonton and Saskatchewan, but I mean it's close. And I also don't think Toronto is as terrible as the other 2 teams. I think Ottawa lost too many people this year, and Montreal is a train wreck. Unfortunately, it's quite sad to watch. But Toronto is actually quietly okay. I think they'll be a pretty easy second in the division.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, 2 last predictions. First one, do we get the announcement this year that Nova Scotia Maritime franchise is a go?
I want to say yes so badly, but I don't think so.
Really?
They're being smart in that they're going to make sure that they have the stadium first, or at least the commitment to build it, and that's going to be the stumbling block.
I will predict that they will announce this year that there will be.
Nothing would make me happier. I would love to be wrong about this.
That would be great. And then Grey Cup prediction. Maclean, you want to go first with your homer pick, and then I'll go with mine?
I'm going to say the Stamps will win over the Ticats, just because it seems like the most obvious pick, the 2 best teams. And, it's been tough for Western teams to win over the crossover. And so I think the Stamps are just that much better than BC and Winnipeg, although BC and Winnipeg are clearly 2A and 2B.
Mm-hmm. I think Mike Riley's going to get hot down the stretch. I think he's going to carry them a la Danny McManus in '94. And pull a last-second upset in Calgary at some point, or if they've won the division, I guess in BC, but whatever. I'll take BC over Hamilton. But again, you and I are hardly unbiased arbiters.
No, indeed.
Actually, you know what?
There's a few things I'm less unbiased in than Canadian football.
I will have you know I am as unbiased on CFL football as David Eby was in the Prop Rep campaign. I am a neutral arbiter.
You're a neutral arbiter.
You can take that to the bank.
Do you think A, the Lions will win the Grey Cup, B, in a blowout? C, will they win it through the crossover?
That's right. Exactly. It's perfect. All right, well, that's it for Hot Stove this week. We will be back next week. Make sure you listen in on the Unspun podcast coming out late Thursday or Friday morning, depending on when they tape and when we get it all posted online. But watch out for that. And then another Rick Clough episode coming on Monday. And I think I'm the guest on this week's Rick Clough. So there you go.
I thought it was Daniel, but I could be wrong. I think
it's me and then Daniel, because I think...
I beg your pardon then.
We're talking apprenticeship numbers. So...
Oh,
but you should preview the Daniel piece, because you have seen it, and apparently...
Oh, yes. This week, Daniel's piece was late this weekend because he was off receiving another award. It's true. And begged forgiveness, but he said the piece would be worth it. And I said, Daniel, of course. And then he sent it. And I was editing it yesterday. It's his best one yet. It's so good. I'm not going to spoil it because I want you to read it. But it's just outstanding. He really is our Indiana Jones, and you're going to see a glimpse into that. It's easily my favorite piece of the ones he's written so far. And I'm a big Daniel Marshall fan.
Yeah, absolutely. Saturday morning? Is that when we see it on the Orca.ca?
Saturday morning,
the Orca.ca. Look for Daniel Marshall's piece. You won't regret it. That's it for us. We'll see you next week at the Orca BC on Twitter. He's at Maclean K. I'm at Jordan Bateman, and Facebook.com/the Orca BC. Thanks for watching, everyone.